As Noreen said, I was in Lesvos and I went initially just to help out, just to go and see what a spare pair of hands would do, because they were having a horrendous situation. And I have an aunt who lives on the mainland of Greece, so I sort of had an empathy with the sufferings of the Greek people who were at the front line of this situation. And just to give you a picture, Lesvos is around the size of the Isle of Man. It has about the same population, has around 80,000 people. And when I went just after the Turkey deal, when a lot of refugees became effectively trapped on the island, there were around 4,500 refugees. That is now nearly 12,000. Just the last couple of weeks, there's over 1,000 people arrived on Lesvos. And just the other day, in the middle of our budgets, our presidential election, etc., there was nearly 30 people drowned trying to get to Lesvos in the sea coming from the south of Lesvos. And that hardly made the news. So it's really, really sad. There's still bodies missing in the sea. They're still looking for them. And, you know, that situation just kind of hit me with the whole 2015 crisis and everything that we all suddenly became aware of, and the feeling that not enough was being done. And I just went out to help. And of course, when I got there and realised the actualities of the situation and the facts and figures, etc., and the people I was working with, I'll show you a picture of them in a few minutes, the Kempsons were doing what they could to help. They lived near a beach, which landed them in the front line with helping people out of the sea. And they said, what would you really like to do? And I said, well, I'd love to work with some children here if that's possible. And they said, go down to Picpa, go down to Lesvos Solidarity, which is an independent camp. So there's a big official camp that a lot of us may have heard of. And then there is this small independent camp, which really catered for people with more vulnerabilities and families with issues such as disability and special needs and post-traumatic stress, mental health issues, etc. So that all is the framework for where I started. Okay, I'm just briefly going a cover of what I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about the story of all the children and the work that we did and the foundations of the space and the principles behind it, such as child-led play, the outcomes and the learning. And really, I endorse everything that Marilise and Sybil have mentioned. I mean, that they were my findings as well on the ground. And I think it's good and comforting to know that our experiences across the different countries and the different authorities are the same. And really what I set out to do is create a safe, secure space for the children. And the lovely chance that happened was that there was a psychologist in the camp, and I was kind of handed to him, and he said to me, what can you do for us? And I was supposed to go home. And I said, well, I could set something up for the children. And he said, yep, fire ahead, go ahead and do that. I said, well, I'm going home in a couple of weeks. No, you're coming back. You know, that was it, you're coming back. But the happy coincidence was that Yanis, his name, he knew, he'd been in Scotland and he'd worked with children in Scotland. So when he said to me, well, what do you do for them? What kind of framework will you use? And what kind of evidence-based background will you bring to the children who are severely traumatised and who have all these special needs? And I said, well, he knew. He was familiar with Ashter. He was familiar with Shilta. He was able to talk about these things with me. And I was high scope trained as well, so he was familiar with high scope. So that was just a bonus. That was really fantastic. It made my job much easier so that I didn't have to go convincing him in any way. So, why create this space? Now, as we've seen from all the experiences, it's absolutely vital to have something, especially for the early years. And because I saw this blog the other day for World Mental Health Day from Dr. Emma Ring, and she talked about it is frequently forgotten that the development of resilience begins in our early years through providing children with a wide range of opportunities to play, discover, resolve conflicts, create and make sense of the world. And we know that resilience is about being able to adapt and bounce back when faced with life events which threaten to destabilise our equilibrium and cause us mental distress. And, you know, it's absolutely vital that this starts in the early years, because the children at this stage have already experienced trauma beyond what children in our countries would have experienced, and they really, really need to have that opportunity for a safe space. And I'll just say here that a lot of the families from the Middle East aren't familiar with early years work. there would be very few early years settings in the Middle East, from at least from all the families that I met from, and they were from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Iraq, some from Lebanon, some from Iran. So that would be a finding that I was kind of novel to me, and I had to build that trust with the parents from a different starting point than I would have imagined. But early years definitely is a place to prevent this. What I heard a lovely term yesterday at the presentations in Monaghan, because we were also launching a Sharing from the Start, which is an integration programme for children from North and South. Believe it or not, it's still vitally needed up there. And one of the people from the EU Sharing from the Start funders had the term mind borders. And mind borders are created in people's minds, so it's attitudes about problems and about solving problems. But definitely, this was an opportunity to actually help with children. I know there were challenges and things like that, but it was definitely an opportunity. So, told you to show you a couple of pictures. I don't show these out of any prurient interest, but I think it's important to have an idea of what the children's experiences have been. I'll go into a bit more detail. So I've used that picture as Eric Kempson and his daughter Eleni, and as I said, they were at the forefront of literally pulling people out of the sea for a lot. They still are doing it. They do night watch, they do all of these things. There's what they call the campfire on the beach on the east side of Lesvos, which is quite close to the airport, and that campfire is there every night to light a way for the families to find the boats to find their way. He lives on the north side, up at the top, and in a place called near Malivos, and a beach called Eftelu. And they did this again and again and again. And I will talk a little bit about fascism in a few minutes, because it was very, very much to the fore on Lesvos. And Eric had to send that daughter, Eleni, away to England because there were so many threats to his family, because there's a resentment towards people helping the refugees there, believe it or not. Resentment towards actually saving people, because they believe that a lot of the fascists on the island believe that the volunteers are causing the problem. If we weren't there, the refugees wouldn't come to Lesvos, even though it's only 4 kilometres from Turkey. And that's why they come there. So this is what happens to families when they arrive. They're pulled out of the sea. So that's a daylight picture. A lot of the time it will happen at night. A lot of the time it will happen at a cliff face, if they happen to not aim their boats in the right direction. So then they have to go to the camp called Moria, which is infamous. BBC ran a feature on it a few weeks ago called it the worst place, the worst refugee camp in the world. It is absolutely horrendous. Around 4,000 people there. When I started, now there are over 9,000. It was built for 2.5. So it's horrendous, with raw sewage running down the little paths, etc. And then this was a picture that was in The Guardian a few weeks ago, and it was a depiction by some children who are refugees, of their experiences. So you can see the drownings, you can see all of that. And I have something that was done for me as well, with some of the children in the camp. So that was. It's just important to understand this and to know where they're coming from. In a bit more detail, the adverse experiences, and I totally take what Sybil's saying about talking to them, but being really, really sensitive. So I actually put this in deliberately because I think it's useful for any of us here who are going to work with refugees, and I think that will be a growing number, I think to have a background picture. So, if you go back to Bronfenbrenner and that whole idea of the system in which the child is situated, and they're situated firstly within their family, and I'll come on to resilient families in a few minutes, but they've all had this sort of terribly disturbed, chaotic system around them. So they're among the most marginalised children in the world. They've been violently dispossessed of their homes. I had one little girl, they had 3 homes bombed. 3 homes. Took a long time to do work with her. And I'll just to say that she was doing really, really well. She was going to school, 8 years of age, going to school. Everything was progressing. In answer to one of your questions about the direct provision, they have to wait a long time on Lesvos. They're trapped there for a very long time in terms of getting their paperwork through. Sometimes they'll maybe a year and a half. Some of the bigger families, maybe with more urgent needs, might be moved a little bit sooner. But then they're landed into Athens. or to Thessaloniki, and they're often end up in a worse situation than the camp that we had for them. They will end up maybe in a tiny apartment sharing with other families. So that's very difficult. But this little particular girl, Miriam, had lost 3 homes, and her parents were really good with her and her little brother, all was going really well. And then last summer her mother got a cancer diagnosis, and her behaviour went totally backwards, as we can understand. That is, she just couldn't cope with the stressors that had just brought her back to a new place of uncertainty, a new place of damage and threat. So that was, we may not hear all these details, and I think it is a thing to wait, sometimes build that confidence, build that trust with the families themselves. They might tell you some of their backstories, they might not. But I think if we have this awareness in a general way, I think that's really important. They have this life, be sensitive. It helps us to be sensitive to them. For example, during the winter, we did film nights once a week, and we had, I was rooting around to get films out and download the films, and I downloaded this absolutely beautiful film, if any of you have ever seen it, called Kobe and the Two Strings. And it's an exquisite film to watch with children. But then I said, no, I think there's a bit at the beginning. So I watched the bit at the beginning, and there's a huge thing with heaving seas and a mother drowning and stuff. I thought, no, I can't show that. Then I thought, for similar reasons, I better not show Bambi. People had donated various films. But, so they can have good experiences. A little guy, I showed the snowman. Yeah, there's no language issues with the snowman. It's mainly visual. And little guy, Cedra, who had lost his mother. She'd been shot by the Taliban. And he was there with his sister and his father. And whole tragic. He'd lost an older brother. All of it was very tragic. But he watched the snowman, and he sat there and had a particular relationship with him over 18 months, because he was the bane of everybody's life when I arrived, and I just hated that. I hate to see a child labelled and being sort of blamed for everything, when a lot of it wasn't his fault. He spoke a different language, most of the children there for a start, and all of those issues. But he watched the snowman with me. And it comes to the end where the snowman melts into the puddle. Imelda, he died. He just, but this was okay. And he saw that I had a little tear in my eye as well, because that always gets me. And, that this was okay. And he was okay with that. So last Christmas, he's now up in northern Greece with his sister. And I sent him the DVD of the snowman. So I was talking to them on Messenger the other week. We were doing a video call, and he ran and he got I watched this the other day. So, these things, the impact that we can have can go beyond what we think we're doing. We think we're doing normal things. So life has been difficult for the children so far. We need to be aware of that. We need to be sensitive not only to the child with whom we're directly dealing, but also to the family members who also have issues and have dealings that they know. So the space that we provided offered support and nurturing to the parents as well. And I know they talk about resilience, and one of the key elements in resilient children is that they have strong, stable backgrounds and nurturing carers. And this helps to develop that for the parents, so that they can offer more stability and security to the child themselves. So it enables you just to see and know that child. And I know, I think Marilee said it, I knew how to work with children. I thought, oh my God, how am I going to work with this? But I knew how to work with children. And I said, well, that's all I have to do. I have to do the best I can with the children. And you don't necessarily, we did introduce some trauma training later on. And as I said, a child like Miriam could do with counselling and could do with some extra support. But most of the children benefited really well from the good quality early year space that we provided. So that's a really useful thing to reassure you. So just a few little elements of the story. We set it up, we got the MSF tent. It looks a bit idyllic there with the sunny sky, but the weather in Greece is very harsh. The weather on the islands is very harsh. You have some months when it's absolutely unbearably hot. We had 50 degrees last summer, not this summer, the previous summer, which I couldn't tolerate. I was nearly passing out. I had to take Ventolin for it because it's really, really challenging. So we had the tent. We couldn't use much of that outdoor space at the time. As Noreen said earlier, a forest school has evolved there, and the people running the forest school are gorgeous, and they've worked in Berlin with some of the forest schools in Germany. So that's been really valuable. But the MSF tent, later in the winter when the weather got really harsh, we moved moved into a prefab, and then we could use some of the outdoor space. That was a bit more limited because of the fascists. A lot of them were members of the tennis club, which was behind the space where the prefab was. So we had limited use of the outdoors then for different reasons, which is just ridiculous. I wasn't allowed to let them kick a ball around in case the ball went over. I had a funny experience with a sort of lad. I was asked would I take him in. He was 21 and he was quite far on the autistic spectrum and very limited in his vocabulary, etc., and very limited in his behaviour boundaries. And I got him out day one peeing into the tennis court. So I had a little smile over that. I took him away and I said, you can't do that and all that. But I was delighted in a way, just my own little rebellion. I became quite politicised over there. I saw such an awful thing. I saw children being tear gassed by the Greek police. I mean, the stuff that's actually happening there is quite awful. So the funding issues, my daughter said, just do a GoFundMe and you'll have some money for your resources. I funded myself for the whole time I was there, but for the resources and the equipment, I managed to get funding from GoFundMe, and anybody here donated. I was so, so grateful for every penny that we got, even sort of a €4 or €5. It was fantastic. I had help of volunteers. Now, this is one of the things from my own early years experience and all our development of Shielta over the years and all the work. Oh my God, the difference that an experienced, trained, skilled person makes to the work is palpable. It's so fantastic. There was one of my co-volunteers was supposed to be here this morning, but she has the flu. But so I had a few wonderful people. Mary Maloney was down, Catherine O'Riordan, some of the people from our earlier sector. And oh God, it was such a relief when somebody like that came, or somebody from England who had good training as well. Some of my volunteers were very mixed. Some of them had a couple of attitude problems, such as they didn't like jigsaws and weren't going to work in the tent because it was dirty. I said, well, you haven't seen the rats yet, Anyway, she was asked to leave. She was really bad. So we had, as I said, this was an opportunity to create a safe space, and within 2 or 3 weeks I was getting feedback that it was so successful, because the camp manager, Thanasis, was the one who usually had to cope with the children running wild around the place. And I'm full on for free play and for all of that, not this running wild thing when children don't know their safety zones, they don't know any of this. So this created the only safe space, the only voice for the children in the camp. So I would go to residents' meetings and I would be the advocate for the children, which was fantastic. And then you had culture clashes there in the sense that people were being put into the camp from many different cultures and family backgrounds. And it's a bit like saying, okay, you're from the Unionist background, you're from a Nationalist background, there you go, you can share the house together because you're both from Ireland. And that was happening a lot, so you had to be sensitive to that as well. There were logistics, as I said, the conditions were quite harsh. The health and safety things, the Pobble would pass out. Pobble would just have me locked up right away. We had to cope with what we called haya, which is snake. I learned the word for snake because, if you went out, if you can see in the forest there, that's something the forest school has to be careful of, is snakes. I put the fascists in the same group as a health and safety issue as well. The children, we had to cope with thieving. And a lot of this was to do with the fact that children had been through so many transient experiences and had nothing of their own, that they would often just take stuff home. They wanted stuff to play with. So we set up a little library system, and that was really, really useful. Where, I had to take pictures of them saying, taking home this book or this piece of equipment, and then a couple of days later saying, look, have you got this, bring it back. And it worked really well. Not at first, but later on it did. So the children called the thieves Alibabas. So that was really funny. I mean, Alibaba wasn't the thief, but that's what they called them. So that was really, really good. As I said, Yanis asked me what was my framework, basically. And I was able to just talk about Ashtar. It was just so simple. And high scope. And he, as I said, he knew these. And for those of you here who aren't familiar with Ashtar, it's our Irish National Curriculum Framework, and it has wonderful things. I mean, well-being is one of the main themes, and identity and belonging. They're all perfect for the children with whom I was working. So we had to get in place things like that, and it just provided such a strong support for me in my approach, and I could speak with authority on what I was doing and confidence. So it was really good. It also provided the children with that regularity, the the consistency and security. As I said, great advocate for free play and running around the campus, fantastic. Okay, sorry. Okay, I'll go faster. But so, you know, all of that was really important. So some of the things we did in the camp, there's some of the responses to identity and belonging in particular. So you can see that it was very difficult to get equipment that related to the children, because the Greek children would be white, so you'd have various normal kind of toys with white-skinned toys and dolls and fiki. So I found Fisher-Price stuff had some children of colour. So we had some opportunities, paint. I just talk about the most popular items, really. So you had Play-Doh. Play-Doh was the most popular with all the age groups that we had, believe it or not. Paint, water, sand. Paint was so important. Building construction equipment. So all of those things were really, really important and really vital. And the books were a challenge, because I would read books to children non-stop. But of course the language issue, so I learned to find visual books. But Hand of Surprise is a great book for anybody who's working with children with the language issues, because you can do the acting out of the fruits and the various things in the story. So some of the key moments, we had children. One of the things I found was that some children who would not necessarily be right away participating would have something that would suddenly click. So the little lad in the bottom there that's back to us is Amir, and Amir was quite demanding and quite troublesome and quite difficult in terms of settling in. And then one sunny day I got water out, and that was it. And he came in the next day waiting, jumping up and down, water, water, water. So there's some other pictures there. The little boy at the top was quite a lot of issues, and we found dance. We had a dance team came, and dance, he just blossomed, and we joined the choir, and we had a few other things. We provided other kinds of challenges as well. I think that was really important, so that children will grow through overcoming fears. So we talked about swimming, and I would advocate any of you that are working in the EROC centres or with children, get them swimming. They will be a bit nervous, perhaps with the fear of perhaps the experiences that they've had, but most of them will actually join. We had wonderful support from the Spanish lifeguards, the prom aid people, and they would do swimming classes all the time. Those three pictures there are related to, we got a choir going, so the children from the ages of 5 up could join the choir, and that was integrated choir with Greek children as well. And then we had an adult choir, and jointly with the adults and the children we put on a show, and that was fantastic. It was fantastic for me too, because I was terrified of the children on the stilts, but that person there, Fred, was wonderful with the children, taught them how to use the stilts, built them for each one, and those two boys came through that, and they learned how to walk on stilts, and on the stage they played football with each other with the stilts. It was just fantastic. So I want to talk about strong families and resilience. I think that was one of the core things that I could see from my experience over the couple of years, is that the families that actually were very strong as a unit, even if they had issues, I mean, like, as I was saying, post-traumatic stress or whatever, but if they were strong as a unit in themselves, you could see that with the children. The little the lady there lying on the ground, and her dad, I'm still in touch with them. They're moved up to northern Greece, and they had 3 children, and he had severe post-traumatic stress, and he came in one day and just played with her, and it was just wonderful and beautiful to see it, and just the look of the sharing between them. The other pictures was 2 boys that were from a family of 9 children, and there again, that mother and father were amazing. They had those children very, very secure. Even despite everything they'd done, they were producing curtains there for our medical centre. One of them had made a boat. I said earlier about the drawing of the boat. They actually made a physical little boat with paper like this, where they made a lifeboat, and they put little creatures in it, and it was each member of their family with little orange coloured life jackets, and with just that whole thing, tears running down their face. So they were secure, but they had the trauma. So just my lessons really from all of that and my learning from it. I suppose they're up there to read, and I think that all of the things are probably self-evident, like the stability, security. The biggest thing probably is that there's always a backstory. So it's not necessarily the big adverse experiences that I mentioned earlier. It can be something that's going on. I mean, that little boy with the snowman, his father was very abusive. We ended up having to take the children away from and make them wards of court. So there's another little boy who's father was very abusive as well to the 6 children. So all of that, there's always other stories as well. So maybe the things that we take for granted that we deal with regular Irish children are also happening for children from there. And just understanding that, and that whole thing of our own attitudes and our own past experience will colour our assumptions, you know. And just basically the highest levels of movement on record. There's going to be more and more children who are refugees travelling around the world and migrating to places like Ireland. And I think, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it's just horrendous. There's a record high of figures coming, and these are official projections for the future. So that's basically it. I just want to say that the early years, you know, I love that quote from Jim Greenman, and that pictures the children waiting patiently to come in to start the kindergarten in the morning, and they come to us stuffed with wonder. I just love that expression. And early years is the place to repair, to rebuild, and to renew these children's trust, where the experiences may have damaged them in the past.